Hello everybody, Mark Schaftlein with you, and this is the Schaftlein Report. We're going to cover everything. We're going to cut through all the propaganda, give it to you straight from left, right, and center. The opinions are what counts.
Hello everybody, Mark Schaftlein with you, and we're here to unpack a crazy week in the Trump administration, focusing on foreign policy, and we're going to also get into some domestic policy with our powerhouse table. Admiral Chuck Kubic and former U.S. Comptroller Dave Walker are our guests today. Joe Visconti, always my co-host. Admiral, I'm going to start with you today on this hot button topic of the quote second strike on the boat. We've got mixed stories coming out. You've been an admiral in the Navy, so why don't you shed some light on this issue for our viewers and listeners?
Yeah, be happy to, and with the caveat that the details keep coming out even as we're speaking here. But I think one of the first things we should do is try to put this into a little historical perspective. There are a lot of folks saying that it's even illegal for the president to do anything in the Caribbean without either a declaration of war or a declaration of the Congress of the authorization to use deadly force. I'd like to remind folks that at the beginning of our nation, then President George Washington formed an army from several state militias and personally led it himself into Western Pennsylvania, my home state, to put down the Whiskey Rebellion. And it was not authorized by Congress, although they did authorize, him to be the commander-in-chief. Then, following that, John Adams, sent our new Navy into the Caribbean to fight the quasi-war with France. Again, not authorized by Congress, and doing the same thing, protecting our coast and our people from pirates in the Caribbean. And lastly, Jefferson, following suit, sent both the Navy and the Marines into the Mediterranean to fight the Barbary pirates. So what the president is doing, and there's many examples of it, is consistent with his role as commander-in-chief. And in that role, he has the obligation, when there is an operation to happen, to set his commander's intent. And the commander's intent has to be clear, it has to be focused, and he then has to allow his subordinates to come up with the actual courses of action and how this will be implemented. I actually, at the beginning of his campaign, when he first asked me to serve as one of his national security advisors in 2016, we had this very discussion about how he would act as the commander-in-chief. And so he did. And then it would be up to the on-site commander to decide what the actual mission was. And the president would say, stop the flow of drugs by sea. The commander would say, the best way to do that, to protect ourselves and to protect America, is to blow up these speedboats that are bringing drugs to our shore. And so that was the mission, to basically sink the ship and the boat. And this, I think, was either the first or one of the early strikes, and I'm not sure even what munitions they used to do it, but it's clear from the videos that we've seen that the first hit did not fulfill the mission. It didn't sink the boat. And then there was a second hit that did fulfill the mission. And so all the talk about executing survivors, violation of the law of war, I don't think that comes into play, because if you look at the example of what they're really talking about, let's just say you're in the Western Pacific, it's World War II, and we sink an enemy ship. The violation of the law of war would come if you then came and strafed the survivors that are floating around in the ocean, rather than attempting to rescue them or give them quarters. So I think this is a lot of people that are taking a few of the facts and embellishing them to their political benefit, and really doesn't get to the heart of the matter, that this was an authorized operation. It had a good intent and it had a good result, although it took 2 rounds to sink the boat. And the rest of this, I think, is just political shaft.
I concur with your comments 100%. There's more politics in this than anything else. Joe, let me go to you next. I mean, you heard the Admiral's comments. Anything you can add to that? I mean, one thing that uh, Pete Hegseth said was, fog of war. I don't know if I would have used those terms or not, considering everything they have on tape. But your thoughts on this whole incident?
Yeah, real quick, as I want to spend more time listening to these great gentlemen today. New York Times actually debunked a story coming from, again, not anonymous sources, inside leaks. Call it the opposition, the deep state, whatever you will. It's, again, Trump will suffer this for this whole term. It's just the way the establishment inside is trying to, and plus the media, trying to just, if not lawfare, every move he makes, just undermine his authority, undermine the performance. And the good news about all this, I think, is right across all the lawfares, we're really getting modern day clarity on every issue, from soup to nuts, from zoning to Capital One murder in this country through the Supreme Court. So evidently America needs to go to this whole civic lesson of determining, what a man is, what a woman is, what right and wrong is, what a criminal is. And it's just more of that pile-on.
Dave Walker, I want your comment on this issue, but then I also want to segue into another topic. You were testifying before Congress. You've done it many times before, and you had some pretty stark reaction to some of those comments. Start with the issue of the day, meaning the strike on the drug boats, and then let's segue into your testimony before Congress.
First, it's shocking there's politics in Washington. And I'll come back to that. All right. Look, I have not seen all the video, but if it's as the Admiral suggested, which the instruction was to sink the boat, and they needed a second shot in order to accomplish that objective, I don't see anything illegal about that. I think at some point in time, people have to use judgment as to whether at some point, it might be advantageous to try to capture a couple of these people and to try to interrogate them. But that's a judgment call. The other issue that relates to this is the 6 members of Congress who ended up doing the video, trying to remind our members of the military that they should not follow an illegal order. I don't personally think that was sedition, but I think it was very stupid. I mean, how are individual members of the military supposed to decide what's legal and illegal on a real-time basis? It was ridiculous. Secondly, with regard to the hearing yesterday, the hearing was before the House Judiciary Constitution Subcommittee, and it was about whether or not we need a balanced budget or fiscal responsibility amendment. We had 4 witnesses. I was the lead witness. I'm happy with what I testified. I'm glad that they had the hearing, but it was political posturing overwhelmingly. The Democrats blaming the Republicans for tax cuts, the Republicans blaming the Democrats for spending increases. Not a serious discussion, in my view, about what our real situation is. One of the things that I brought to the table was that the not-for-profit that I chair, the Federal Fiscal Sustainability Foundation, discovered over 3 years ago that Congress should have called a convention as far back as '79. There were enough active applications for a fiscal responsibility amendment back in '79, continuing for 25 years, and then across the goal line again in 2016 and 17, they did nothing. And so now I think we're in a situation where one of 2 things is going to happen. Either Congress is going to have to propose something, and I don't think they can get 2/3 vote in the House and the Senate to propose a constitutional amendment, or Congress is going to have to call that convention, which they should have done many years ago, and let the states do it. The founders envisioned that the states needed to have equal rights to propose amendments. Our finding of 3 years ago was confirmed by the National Federalism Commission, which is an official interstate governmental body. I entered their report into the record, and I also entered into the record a draft call of a convention. So now let's see what happens. But if Congress doesn't act within a reasonable period of time, I think it's time for the states to stand up and sue the Congress. That will end up in the Supreme Court, and that will be the biggest federalism case in the history of the United States.
When you were testifying, Dave, what was the thoughts relative to this $38 trillion of debt that the United States has got itself in? Was there any? I mean, I assume Democrats were blaming Republicans for blaming Democrats, but was there any seriousness to addressing that?
Well, so a few of the members were very serious about it. Thomas Massey, as you know, is the only
Yep.
Republican who didn't vote for the One Big Beautiful Bill Act. Okay, he was very serious about it. The chairman was serious about it. But then again, as I said, we discovered they should have called this convention years ago, and there was very little discussion about that. I mean, and so we'll see what they end up doing. One other thing you need to understand: 38 trillion is not the number. The total liabilities and unfunded obligations of the United States are well in excess of $125 trillion, and they're growing faster than the economy. And then secondly, things really started spinning out of control in 2002. And that's when I started speaking out, okay? If you look at where we are now versus where we were then, it's horrendous. And both parties have controlled the Senate and the House since then at different times. And both parties have occupied the White House since then. So this is a bipartisan problem.
Yeah, I'm going to concur with that for sure. And when I reference 38 trillion, I'm just talking about what the current fiscal deficit, not counting
the debt clock. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. Admiral, I want to come back to you. A couple comments here. It seems to me that while the press is trying to quote nail Secretary of Defense Hegseth, they're really attacking Admiral Bradley. And from everything I've seen about Admiral Bradley, from his men that reported to him, this man has a stellar, almost mythical background. I mean, he is incredibly highly educated, is popular with his men, has complete support from Hegseth and Trump. What do you make of these media accounts before we even know what he's testifying in private, trying to basically hang him up to dry?
Well, full disclosure, I spent a lot of time supporting Navy SEALs in my career as well, particularly in Iraq and Afghanistan. And as a result, I'm an honorary frogman. So, know these guys, know their leaders, and I think it's going to be really difficult for those trying to question him, because I'm sure he's got a clear mind on it. He's made a decision. He made it in combat, and probably made many decisions like that previously. You have to have been there to understand what it's like when you have troops engaged and you're the commander, and you have to make instantaneous decisions with incomplete information. And you do it based on your experience. You do it based on what mission you're trying to accomplish. And I think we're going to find out that that's exactly what he's going to say and do. I have every confidence that someone who has risen to 4 stars as a Navy SEAL is not going to take a lot of crap, from people who are just trying to score political points. And I have confidence that he'll be able to clarify a lot of this, say exactly what happened, and then move on. It's tough to take down a Navy SEAL, even if you are
I am one
politician. Hey, can I make a comment too on Dave's comments about the budget?
Sure.
Dave, you'll remember that that Reagan, his goal was to balance the federal budget at 19% of GDP, and he was working towards that. That's when he cut the 3-to-1 deal with Tip O'Neill, and he got the the $1 in tax increases, but he never got the $3 in savings he would talk about. A while ago, I wrote a short paper, that took a look at FY22 and look at this issue of the deficit. I think part of it is we have to find a way to communicate what's at issue in a much more simple manner than what's happening now. If you look at the fiscal year 22, GDP was 25 trillion and the national debt was 31 trillion. And so our debt was 124% of GDP. And during that same time, again, Biden was president, our expenditures were 6.27 trillion, or 25% of GDP, but our revenue was only 4.17 trillion, which is 17% of GDP. So if you're trying to balance at 19, you've got 8 points there that you're trying to deal with, and it is very, very difficult to do it. But if you look at it and you were to say, let's try to balance at 19% of GDP, and whether you do that by just a budget submission, by talking about it, by forcing the cuts, if we had done that using fiscal year 22 as a baseline, we could have balanced at 19% of GDP by fiscal year 27 by cutting 2.54 billion per year against the FY22 dollars. Now, granted, that also cuts out any inflation that was in there, but it's a task that seems to me to be doable, at least in fiscal year 22. Now that we're talking about a $38 trillion debt, not a 31, it gets harder. But I think that this is a matter of framing it in a very simple manner, and then going ahead with something a little more formal than the impromptu Doge cuts, by looking at this and saying, here is our target. You know, we have to look back at fiscal year 22, and we have to then look at somehow we managed to fund America, you know, with a certain, you know, expenditures. We need to get back to that, and we need to get our revenues to balance. And then you put together a 5-year plan that does it, and you work the politics of it. Although you could try to enforce it with a constitutional amendment, I think one of the risks of a constitutional convention would be all the other antics that would go on, and it could get out of control. But I think we have to force it with budget discipline and with basically strong, simple targets that we force to happen, and that we go ahead and we don't sign, we veto things that don't meet that goal. So again, you're the expert on it, but I played with this a while ago, and always remember, you know, working for Reagan and what he was trying to do. And he was an economist, and I think he's got it right. Let's shoot for 19% of GDP, and I think we'll be okay.
Yeah. Well, first, let me give you a reaction. To me, one of the real tragedies is Reagan campaigned on balancing the budget. And yet, during his tenure, Congress should have called a convention, and they never did. All right. And I've given you all those dates or whatever. Secondly, while 19% might have been realistic now, I do not believe it's realistic today. We've got 3 things that are working against us: demographics, healthcare cost, and interest expense. Interest is now the second largest line item. It's over $1 trillion a year. It's the fastest growing expense for which we get nothing. My view is we need 3 things. Number one, we do need a constitutional amendment, because I don't believe that Congress will ever make the tough choices on spending and revenues, you know, without being forced to do it. And the alternative is, you know, a crisis, and a crisis would be a global depression if the loss of confidence in the United States' ability to deal with its finances. So I think we've got to have a constitutional amendment. It ought to focus on debt to GDP, not try to do annual balance. That makes no sense. In addition to that, we've got to have a statutory fiscal commission that learns the lessons from Simpson-Bowles, that does a significant amount of citizen education engagement effort, solicits input, sets the table for a tough up or down vote in Congress. And I think we need Doge too. What Doge did was not what needs to be done, and they didn't go about it the right way. We need to do a fundamental re-baseline of looking at what the government does, how it does it, who does it, et cetera. Last thing, you know, the last thing is that, you know, I'll come back later with regard to the last thing. I slipped my mind right now. So, yeah.
Well, Joe, let me bring you in on this discussion, because these are all great points, but a couple real-time things to consider. We've had job losses in 3 out of the last 4 months, according to ADP. Inflation is still hovering at 2.7%, which is higher than it needs to be. And compounding inflation over a period of time is the biggest thing by far that hurts low-income Americans. I mean, the wealthier types can deal with it, and even upper middle. But man, when you're talking about the lower end of the scale and inflation running 2.7, I know it's come down from 9 under Biden, but 2.7 is still a high number. The Federal Reserve will reduce interest rates next week, I believe, by 25 basis points. We're going to probably have a new Fed chairman named before the end of the year. Basically, going to have a shadow Fed chairman until Jerome Powell steps aside in May, unless he leaves earlier. Joe, what do you make of the economy right now? Because, you know, we're this Democratic talking point, which took hold for a while, does seem to be fading as Trump addresses this. So your thoughts, where are we right now?
It was kind of funny this morning. I always like to take it personal. I'm talking to my two adult children who are in my house, and I'm at my mother's house who passed away last year. We're all doing electric bills and this and that. My daughter's in Boston half the time. I'm like, what? I didn't really realize it was just to send money. It's like $320 for an electric bill, and we're very frugal for a house. And this is why they're going crazy in Connecticut. It's not just Connecticut, but so the utilities, the car insurances, not necessarily the price of gas, that is coming down, but plus the burden and the credit card debt most Americans are carrying from COVID. I talked to some people at shopping yesterday. I ask everybody, what's their, I just complained, and they start complaining at Home Depot. Yeah, my credit cards, it was the COVID. It's because everyone needs something to blame. Of course, they probably spent more than they should have, but they had a great reason with COVID and all the follow-up years after COVID to never get back on track. So we're carrying this not on track debt, plus the energy costs, the car insurances, the health insurances cost, and the food basically is the only thing you really get to see. What the heck? I was at Whole Foods. What's the price of a dozen? It's insane. So that's the sticker shock, because you don't see the car payments and utilities. You just send them out coming out of your checkbook or your online payments. But when you're faced at the grocery store to want to buy and you see $120 for 2 bags, I don't think Trump can get this back that quick. I think it's going to take time before the food itself. And so we're in a place where, the 4 years of the Biden administration, as we all know, and everything that went with it, plus the COVID during, Trump's last year, it's just put us in a place where all the things Trump is trying to do, I believe, are going to be helpful and healthy. They have to kick in, and they're not going to kick in 6 months or maybe not even a year. Even interest rate cuts aren't going to help it. People that own homes with low interest rates don't want to sell the homes. So we're in this weird position. I'm not against Trump, what he's doing, but I think it's going to take us longer. Democrats know that. They created half this mess or more, and they're just going to game it. Again, like Dave said, politics in Washington, to just keep saying affordability, and things are very, very tight.
Go ahead,
Mike, I
Dave.
remember what I wanted to say to the Admiral, okay? He's talking about convey things in simpler terms. I can tell you one of the things that I talked about yesterday that resonates with the people. Let's say that Uncle Sam had the same financial situation as the U.S. government, okay? And here's what I did: is I took the consolidated financial statements for the U.S. government as of September 30, 2024, which is the latest that's available. All right, I dropped 8 zeros. That's all I did. All right. So here's Uncle Sam. Uncle Sam made $50,000. He spent $74,000. He had an annual deficit of $24,000. He has total liabilities and unfunded obligations of $1,240,000. But don't worry, he's got $57,000 in assets, so he's only underwater $1,183,000. Would you lend money to Uncle Sam? Those
Absolutely.
are real numbers.
Yeah, that's a really good way to look at it. By the way, I have a chart that I like to show that I don't know whether it can be seen.
Yeah,
but
it can.
shows, this is the affordability chart, because it shows during Trump's first era how he got inflation down and wages up, and it shows how Biden reversed that with inflation up and wages down. This is the challenge now, to go back to where Trump was. You can see he kind of started even, and people will start to feel that. Now that's going to basically, require, wages to increase. And if the wages increase too quickly versus cost, then you have a problem as well. And I'm not an economist, but I think that we have to come up with some sort of ways to show what affordability is, because once you've suffered through the Biden inflation, prices are never going to drop down on commodities like they're dropping down on energy, because that's something we can solve with increased production and things like that. So I think we need to realize that affordability isn't just going to be dropping prices. It's going to be the combination of jobs and prices dropping. And we're also going to have to deal with entitlements and things of that nature. And some of that's going to have to be reduced as well. But I think there needs to be a plan that says, here's where we're trying to head to breach this affordability issue, and talk about it in some substantial ways of what we're really doing, as opposed to just the political talk that the Democrats are using, you know, with the word affordability, and blaming it all on Trump at this point.
Well, real quickly, I think the Republicans have done a terrible job of communicating on this issue. A terrible job. And real wage growth is actually up 0.8%. Inflation's down to, you know, about 2.7. All right. But once the prices go up, they rarely come down.
All right. And let me add something for all three of you guys to chew on here. Okay. You know, we've got $1.23 trillion credit card debt. Every time we do this show, it never goes down. That number constantly goes up. And the other thing that's happening, all these programs throughout the history of our country, once a program gets put in place, albeit examples, subsidies for the Affordable Care Act, set to expire here on 12/31. But no, every program we've ever done as a country, it never gets cut. It's always expanded. So, Admiral, I'm going to go to you first here. I mean, I heard a crazy proposal came out this week, bipartisan, led by Republicans, that said, well, maybe we can do subsidies for a family of four making up to $192,000. I was like shocked. I'm like, wait a minute, lump a number off that. And if you said a family of four making 92,000, I might say, okay, maybe for a year, let's ease it out. But no, it almost seems like we have people in the Republican Party who are now saying, well, wait a minute, you know, a lot of our constituents fall in this area. We got to do something about this. Admiral, your thoughts on this, and then Dave, to you, because this to me seems like it's going in the wrong direction.
Well, I think what is an example of lazy politics. You know, it's very easy to go out and promise people you're going to give them more money and try to buy their votes, as opposed to the tougher job, which is to go out and talk about it from a macro perspective as to what has to happen to keep America solvent and to keep the opportunity available to you. So I'm just not really in favor of that. In fact, if I had a chance to discuss the tax cuts with you know, now President Trump, I would point out to him that despite all of his efforts to cut taxes for the bulk of Americans during that whole period, my taxes all went up. So I'm on that half of the curve that is paying more and just sucking it up. So I think that we've got to find a better way to talk about this rather than just passing out money. But it is easy, and in some cases may be necessary to counter what the Democrats are doing. They're promising that they're going to make things more affordable and you're going to get more money, but they're not delivering. So maybe there has to be some sort of a short-term delivering of something to be able to blunt that, because we're going to be in much worse shape if all we do for the next, you know, last half of the Trump term is talk about impeachment and things again, because it's we could really collapse at that point. And that gets into some of the other things that are happening internationally with what China is up to and what's really happening in South America.
Dave, to you, and then we'll come back and cover some of the international stuff. Your thoughts on what the Admiral just referenced.
Well, you know, let's go back to Ronald Reagan. The only thing that has perpetual life is, you know, taxes in a federal program, right? I mean, that's it. I mean, the bottom line is that, you know, it's easy to make promises with regard to tax cuts or you know, subsidies or spending programs or whatever else. It's tough to turn them off. I mean, these subsidies were supposed to be for a temporary period of time associated with COVID. The federal government stated that COVID was over in May of 2022, and yet we're still wanting to provide subsidies. And by the way, the subsidies include people, families making over $400,000 a year. Okay, you know, what we need to do in the healthcare area is something we've never done. We need to have an honest discussion and debate about how much universal health care is appropriate, affordable, and sustainable, because we've way overpromised, and we've got to rationalize those promises. My personal view, and based on feedback from the American people and a lot of my citizen education engagement efforts, it's preventative wellness and catastrophic protection. We're doing more for veterans, doing more for the disabled, doing more for the poor, but the government typically overpromises, oversubsidizes, and it bills it builds something that by definition cannot stand the test of time.
Mark, 2 weeks ago, I'm pretty sure you rejected my comment that the Republicans were going to push for subsidies, continued subsidies. I didn't say how much or what, but again, Visconti was right. Here's a quick one. Yesterday, I had to renew my Medicare, United Healthcare, which is right across the street from here in Hartford. And I went through it. They no longer offer in our district in Connecticut PPOs. You have to go with a
HMO.
And that's fine. And I went to them, and the spiel they were giving was, well, the president and the Congress is cutting Medicare and this and that and the other thing. And so, the bottom line is this healthcare monster with the utility costs. And I hate to say car insurance, we'll just leave that as an anomaly, but car insurances, you probably get a deal. But the people looking at the bottom line, they got the mortgage, the taxes on the house, the food, the utilities, the healthcare. These are the monsters that the middle class and everyone else below the middle class is fighting for. And they're juggling. People are living in each other's houses. So Americans will survive. They're just going to get angry. And what they get angry at is the key, and that's politics. So if the Republicans can't figure this out with the subsidies and the healthcare, and do something new with the healthcare, which I doubt they will, Big Pharma and the rest of those monster industries are just going to continue to in a swing a year where it's the midterms. I don't think we're going to see a lot of change.
Well.
Hey, Dave, you probably remember too that Reagan proposed a catastrophic, healthcare bill. It actually got passed and enacted, and the idea was that if the government picked up the catastrophic piece at the top, then the other insurance would be affordable, particularly if there was a first payer was the individual who was sick in that area. In fact, we were even talking around in Domestic Policy Council at that point in time about how if you had the Catastrophic Care Act in and you had insurance, that there would be some way at the end of the year, if all you did during the year was do your annual physical and follow the doctor's instruction, after Thanksgiving, you would get a bonus on your health care for staying healthy. And that was a radical change. As you know, also eventually that whole act was disestablished. It was basically repealed, the catastrophic health care. So I think that one of the things they have to do is not fall into the trap of reforming Obamacare and just talking about subsidies. This has to be a whole new way to go about it. And it has to be built off of the one big beautiful bill and what was accomplished in that bill on a positive note, and go after the Democrats with the idea that here is our plan. This is going to work. All you want to do is keep dumping money into the plan that's failing.
And I'll tell you what I think is going to happen. I think they are going to make modifications to the subsidies. They're going to end up, lowering eligibility for people that are eligible for it. They're going to extend subsidies for people below that level for probably, I'm going to guess, 1.5 to 2 years to get past the midterm. But during that period of time, we need to have a much more serious discussion about where do we go from here on healthcare. And I got 82% support from representative groups of voters in the North and the South for that we ought to have universal preventative wellness and catastrophic that would be publicly financed but delivered through not the government, delivered through not-for-profit and for-profit hospitals and everything else. And we'll do more for veterans, we'll do more for the disabled, we'll do more for the poor. But then if people want more than that, they get it through their employer, their union, their industry association, whatever it might be. The other thing we got to do is we lose hundreds of billions of dollars a year in revenue because individuals never pay income or payroll tax on employer-provided and paid health care. It's either number one or number two. Normally, you do subsidies for things, that otherwise people don't want or won't do. But that's stupid for health care. We got a huge problem. So it's not just the front door spending, it's the back door spending, which results in loss of revenues, and we've got to get control of that too.
Joe, I tell you one thing, I wish Trump would have the Admiral and Dave on his committee advising. Their suggestions are so much common sense And I think one thing we clearly need to do is communicate better, because when you take the legacy media and all they're talking about is Obamacare and subsidies, we lose. That's not a good communication.
Well, what we should do then is we should do a nice 90-minute show. We'll bring Steve Stepanek on, and we'll do a little bit of different roundtable, and we'll get this to. It's easy to get them to everyone, but put these things out, because this is why also I invited. I haven't heard from him yet. Chris Shays, he lost his wife, former congressman. He's close to Dave, and he didn't respond. But I want Dave to reach out to Chris, and Chris is pretty anti-Trump, but he's got so much experience also. And I'm thinking, the Patriot TV and Gateway and everything we're working with, all these, I don't want to say old timers, they're all old timers, but all this experience can't get just pushed out because they were considered rhinos or Republican establishment. There's a lot of brains out there that can be helpful, that aren't getting access to help, not just this administration, but the whole political establishment in Washington. And I think that's something Patriot TV really has to think about for the programming.
Well, one thing I want to do, I want to shift subjects now. I want to get on to some international affairs. Well, again, we've got Dave and the Admiral here. Admiral, I'm going to start with you on this. I want you to comment on two things for us. The talks between Steve Witkoff, Vladimir Putin, obviously Jared Kushner in the same room. And then let's talk about what's going on or what's not going on relative to Venezuela. Those seem to be the two hot buttons of the week.
Yeah, that's a lot. Let me see if I can be, somewhat brief here. We've spoken before about my thoughts on the Ukraine. And again, just in history, I was a part of the implementation of the Bosnian peace accords, the Dayton peace accords that settled the war in Bosnia. And I see a lot of similarities between that and what's happened in Ukraine. And I've been speaking on that on various podcasts for about 2 years, and my position really hasn't changed. And we're getting close to it, but we're to the point now where there are too many loose ends to argue about, and we're missing, once again, the big picture. The big picture is that, Russia wants to maintain its presence in the Crimea, particularly its Navy base at Sevastopol, and it wants land access to that as opposed to the bridge that keeps getting blown up. And it wants to have a security for ethnic Russians who are living in the Donbass. And the rest of it is kind of, I think, lost in all of the fighting. At the same time, what Russia wants is they want a buffer. They don't want Ukraine to be a part of NATO. At the same time, Ukraine would like to be a part of the European Union. It would like to be able to trade, and it has this desire that it wants to keep all of its territory. But if you look historically, that territory has been fought over since the Huns fought the Vikings in 400 AD. Right. And it was last settled in the Peace Treaty of Paris in 1856, which gave the Crimea to Russia. And then all the other stuff that's happened in between, I think needs to boil down to the fact that there needs to be some just basic conditions. And that is, we recognize the territory that Russia took in 2014 when Obama was president, which is the Crimea and a section of the Donbass. And then we go from there to the point that we will not have Ukraine in NATO either forever or pick a time, 20 years, 15 years. And that's what Russia wants. And then we basically say, Russia, you got what you're fighting for. And then we go to Kiev and we say, you all defended Kiev. You defended your capital. You fought valiantly. You've saved your country. Now the only issue is what happens to the people in the Donbass. And I think that we should be talking about a comprehensive peace treaty. We should be talking about an armistice, where basically people lay down their arms like they did after World War I, after they did in Korea. Both sides claim victory. You hold it there, and then you have a period of time where you allow cross-migration in that area of people who would want to be Russian versus people who want to be Ukrainian. You let that sort itself out. Then you have some sort of a plebiscite in 3 years maybe that says the people of Donetsk, do you want to be Ukrainian or Russian? The people of Luhansk, do you want to be Ukrainian or Russian? And as a part of the overall deal, everybody pulls back to the pre-war borders, but for ceding, the Crimea. And I think if people started talking about the history of that area and all of that, I think that's where it needs to get to. Some of the other details of this 28, now 26, now 19-point plan, which we haven't really seen, I think are clouding the issue. Just like we settled Bosnia by, redrawing the map and building a road, I think we can settle the Ukraine by redrawing the map and building a road as well. I think that's what has to happen. And right now, everybody is kind of still debating around it. Meanwhile, people are fighting, people are dying, and we're really, once again, kind of stuck. And then I think that needs to be kind of imposed on both parties by the world body, somehow. And Trump, I think, is trying to get to that point with getting each person to write down their demands and all. But I don't know that the folks we have sitting at the table are going to be able to do it without Trump personally getting involved at some point. So that's kind of my thought on the Ukraine. I can talk about Venezuela, or we can discuss that a little bit more.
Yeah, let's have follow-up call on Ukraine. We can go back to Venezuela after this. Dave, your thoughts on what the Admiral was just saying? And my direct question is Trump getting falsely blamed for trying to effectively what the Admiral just said is in a lot of what Trump's plan is. People are saying, well, now you're just giving it to Putin for land he hasn't even, conquered yet. I mean, Dave, your thoughts on that relative to this subject?
Well, I don't think it's appropriate to give Putin territory that he hasn't conquered yet. Look, I largely agree with what the Admiral said. I said, frankly, when this thing got started, that I thought that Putin's objective was several-fold. Number one, he wanted Crimea. He wanted to make sure that he kept Crimea. Number two, he wanted a land bridge between Russia and Crimea. Thirdly, he wanted to protect the Russian ethnic and speaking people in the Donbass. Okay. Fourthly, he did not want Ukraine to be in NATO, but he didn't have a problem with him being in the European Union. Fifthly, he wanted a new election, for Ukraine, for president of Ukraine. And that he wanted a buffer between NATO and Russia. All right. So he didn't want to take over all of Ukraine. He didn't want to invade NATO. Hell, he can't even beat Ukraine. You think you're gonna beat NATO? It's ridiculous. Okay. I think this is going to end in some type of an armistice. People are just going to quit fighting. Okay. I think there needs to be some type of a treaty to provide security to Ukraine outside of NATO. Keep in mind the Budapest Agreement was a total worthless piece of paper. The U.S., the UK, Russia, and Ukraine said that we would guarantee Ukraine's territorial integrity if they gave up their nuclear weapons. They did give up the nuclear weapons. Right. And then in 2014, when Obama was president, Russia took Crimea. Nobody did anything. Okay. Right. And then due to the disastrous exit from Afghanistan and the emboldenment of Putin and our adversaries, they took eastern, Ukraine as well. And so the bottom line is, I think you have to get realistic. Russia's not going to win, quote unquote, meaning take over everything. Okay. Ukraine's not going to win. We got to get realistic about how this thing comes to a conclusion. I will say one last thing. I don't think the American people cares about a lot of these international things. And the president better understand that the reason that Bush 41 lost, even though he had a 90% plus favorability rating a year before the election, was because he was focused internationally rather than domestically. Now, I commend him for trying to solve all these conflicts, but I don't think the American people care that much about it.
You took the words right out of my mouth. And Admiral, I'm going to come back to you real quick on this. Yeah, I want you to talk about Venezuela, but again, I'm about as pro-Trump as you can get, but I don't recall anywhere in the campaign where Venezuela was even on the map. Okay, so help me out with this here. A lot of the American public, even people that supported Trump, are saying, "Wait a minute, you're talking about missiles into Venezuela? I mean, Is that a bridge too far, Admiral? Or give me some justification here for this.
Well, let's talk again about the big picture of what's happening, and it's much bigger than just stopping the flow of drugs. What we have is a continuing increased influence of China in South America. And you ask, why are they doing that? They're doing it here because we're doing it there. We're basically increasing our presence, talking to people who were either neutral or maybe allied with China, and they're coming to our side. Look at Vietnam, for example. And so why they're doing it is if you look at what is the biggest threat to China today, it's that they have to feed 1.4 billion people every day. They don't have their own energy supply, and they don't have a protein supply that's big enough to basically handle that. And so they rely on South America for 37%, at least the last time I looked, of their food, of their protein. And they have to have the influence there, and they also feel like they can counter what we're doing there. So you have two things we're trying to do. We're trying to basically defund those, strong political bosses in South America that are inclined then to lean towards China. And at the same time stop the drug trade. So when we go ahead and go after Venezuela, which has all the oil that China needs and has a gateway into Brazil and other places which have all the food that they need, we're basically trying to stop China while at the same time fulfilling the campaign project to finally fight the war on drugs. Dave and I know there was Reagan who started the war on drugs, but all we did was kind of talk about it. It was in a philosophical position at that time. We did various different things that we thought would deal with it. But, the difference is, I think, when Trump, a lot of politicians, people who come in, even presidents, they look like they've been given a position. And they think that my position allows me to do certain things. There's people who are supporting me, and a lot of it is shaping policy. Trump looks at it as a job. And what we need are more politicians who look at it as a job, that are things that need to get done, and you have to take action to do it, and you have to not try to do the same things that failed. So I think that's where Venezuela is. It's kind of in the keystone of the war on drugs versus the containment of China, and the idea that we have sailed our fleet into there. Again, I have no inside information, but as a military guy, I knew that we did a lot of things before we invaded Iraq. When I was the division commander of the Navy Seabees attached to the Marines, that we were saying we were just doing exercises and practicing. Well, we were practicing for the real deal. And the real deal was at a top secret level. The practices were at a secret level. There's a lot of practicing going on in the Caribbean now that really could be sending a message to those in the South China Sea. And so that's why I think we're focusing on it right now. Is it's a double, a double problem. One, stop the drugs, get rid of the money that's flowing into these, leaders like Maduro, and then start to push China back on their side of the date line.
Yeah, go ahead, Dave.
I think that Maduro is going to be gone one way or the other. He's either going to leave and seek asylum someplace, and we will help to facilitate that, or he will learn the lesson of Noriega.
Yeah,
one or the other, but he's gone.
Yeah, I mean, he's starting to allow deportation flights back into Venezuela.
Right.
And if I could pick up, Joe, for what the Admiral was just talking about, I mean, throughout history, it always comes down to economic reasons. You get rid of Maduro, people don't realize it, but the Admiral's correct. They're the Saudi Arabia of the Americas. I mean, they have that much oil in Venezuela. And if you were to get an American-friendly regime in there, and you could have American energy companies re-engaged in Venezuela with the technical expertise it takes, my goodness, you talk about oil flowing out of Venezuela. If it were a friendly state pre-Maduro.
That's the oil that Texas can refine. That special oil. It's not the same as your Mideast oil. Right. But even if it's the oil economics, I think this is not a show of force. Trump is going to prepare to completely do what he has to do. He just said a couple of days ago in his cabinet meeting that they're going to start bombing on the land in Venezuela.
Well, and let's
I-
not forget,
I-
let's not forget that, you know, during the 90s we had Navy SEALs and Navy Seabees in Colombia. You know, the difference was we were working with their leadership against the drugs,
Right.
and now they're one and the same, the
Yeah.
leadership and the drugs. But we've had people, you know, in combat in South America quietly decades ago.
My gut feeling, real quick, 10 words or less, we're not invading. I think there's going to be regime change. And the energy and the muscle is there to make sure nothing crazy happens in that whole region. They need the stability, the guarantee that that force is there. The president who had won, that lady, she was just thrown out of office. She never got sworn in by Maduro. So I think it's going to be a lot of force that's required, but not utilized. That's my gut.
And the interesting thing that Secretary Hegseth said is he knows we know where all the targets are.
Yeah.
Well, if those targets are, I'm just posing this question in the group, what if those targets are in Mexico? We gonna bomb Mexico? Take them out? I don't know about that. I mean, maybe yes, maybe no. But,
well, right now the cartels are actually running that whole region for Mexico.
Oh, I know.
As well. So it's like cancer. And so, you know, I think that's why Trump is there for a variety of reasons. But you're right. You all about the American public just wants their prices low. They want to have a nice Christmas without going to debt for January, which is what everybody's going to do, and survive and get through the holidays. And they're going to want change. In the springtime, Americans are going to want change. The ones that are with Trump. And
all right,
so,
let me put a bow on this thing, because you've got the Trump administration forecasting 4% GDP growth next year. You've got a stock market near record highs. Interest rates are going to come down. They're likely to fall further next year, reducing the interest on the national debt. Admiral, we'll start with you. Dave, go to you, and then Joe. Quick comment, and then we'll wrap this piece up. Those are all good things, but somehow Americans aren't feeling it. Tie that bow together as we wrap this up.
Well, I think we got to do a lot more of what our local Congressman Jen Kiggins is doing. You know, former Navy helo pilot and all, and she's already running positive ads talking about the good things that happened in the big beautiful bill, as far as you know Medicaid, as far as the taxes and things like that. I think we have to start now with putting out the positive message, and then using that to deflect what we know is going to be every Democrat running in the midterms is going to run against Trump. And we have to be able to get to the point where our own candidates are able to say, you know, here is what we have done. Don't just say, here's what Trump has done. Here is what we have done that is making your life better. And here is what's going to happen again if you give control to the Democrats. And we have to basically push them, not just to criticize, but come right back and say, okay, what would you do now different than what's happening now if you were in office? And you know, I think that's what happens. If we fall into the trap of just trying to run away from Trump, we're going to lose big.
Oh, yeah. Dave?
Communicate, communicate, communicate. And I think the Republicans have failed to be effective in that regard, to be able to put things in context. I mean, I just looked at something on social media within the last 12 hours where somebody said that when Biden took office in January of 2021, that inflation was 9.7%, and it was brought down to 3% by the end of his term. Total BS, okay?
Yeah.
Total BS, all right? And so, you know, I think we need to be much more assertive on messaging, but projections are just that. They're projections. They may or may not turn out to be reality. I come back to what I said before: more sophisticated and effective communications and more focus on domestic issues rather than international issues. And last thing, Trump isn't on the ballot, but Trump will be what the Democrats talk about, but Trump generates turnout.
Yes, he does.
So, you know, you got to be careful. This is a midterm election.
Yeah.
And there is a signal that came from Tennessee that we need to take more seriously. And if you look at the generic ballot of Democrats versus Republicans, the Republicans are down now. And 4 years ago, they were up by 10. We're now down by 5.
Yeah. Joe,
My 2 cents quick. I want to hear these gentlemen. They're so great. People need to make more money. They want a pay increase. They haven't seen it forever. Beyond all the savings and the numbers and the things are a little cheaper. I need more cash. I need more money, and I'm not getting a pay increase. And that's the thing that's got to happen. The supply and demand, companies hiring people or giving them not just the cost of living, but a real pay increase. And especially the young people, where they can see opportunity. And that's not something Trump is setting the groundwork for that. My fear it's going to take a lot longer than next year before it really shows itself. Kind of like Reagan took to almost 84 before we all felt, wow, it's working.
Well, one thing we've all four of us have said it, you have to focus on domestic issues, laser focus on the economy, or we're going to have a George Bush redo here. All right, breaking news came out. And John, I want to start with you on this. The pipe bomb from January 6th, arrested. Don't know his name yet, but we've talked about that for years. Your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I caught his name. I can't recall it at the point. Things are moving so fast. Why did it take 5 years? And I was there in January, as you know, doing your show that day, January 5th.
Yes, you were.
But again, God bless it. Hopefully we can get our intelligence communities and law enforcement, not unbiased and doing their jobs without any kind of political pressure. That's the great news. And again, whatever we find out, I think the person is a little left and radical, but nothing's surprising. But again, even that is old news, and this is Trump's problem for next year. Can't keep beating dead horses about yesterday. Right. I do that all the time, but he can't. He's really got to focus and look forward versus bringing up the past problems and issues of all the things he suffered through with his administration.
I agree. I mean, people are looking to the future. But by the way, I would say that, real wages are up 0.8%. That's not a lot, okay? But that's better than it was during Biden. They were down during Biden.
Yep. Admiral, quick piece for you right now. And this doesn't relate to the economy, but Trump's issued quite a few pardons. I mean, what did you make of the pardon for Representative Henry Cuellar, a Democrat out of Texas? High-profile case.
Yeah, I think it's simple. What Trump is trying to show is that he's politically impartial to fighting against what he called lawfare and all of that. And I think in his heart of hearts, he hopes Henry becomes a Republican. And of course, Henry's saying, if I'm a Republican running that district, I probably can't get elected. I need to keep the Democrat votes, bring a few Republicans in, and then vote with you, Mr. President. Maybe change after he's elected. But I think that a lot of this is there's a lot of stuff being thrown at him, and he sees part of his strategy as throwing as much back at them to keep them off balance as they can while he tries to press forward. And I agree that if the Congress can stop just trying to have investigations and do things and let this pipe bomb thing work itself out, and get to work. We still have 9 appropriation bills that need to be passed. If we can do that without another continuing resolution or some sort of an omnibus, that'll be great. And then we got to do some real serious work on the healthcare issue that we've talked about. And I think Trump needs to circle the wagons a bit and decide what does he really want to do about immigration, and do we need to be trying to do something so that right after the midterms we can tee up an immigration bill, to fix that. But the economy, healthcare, and immigration are the things he needs to focus on. By that time, hopefully, he's got the rest of the world afraid that what he might do if they upset him. And so I think that's part of Venezuela. He doesn't want other people cropping up, and probably won't have to deal with Colombia and Mexico if he deals harshly with Venezuela. So I agree with everybody. Let's stick to the economy, and let's realize that there's a bigger picture going on in the world, and Trump kind of has a handle on that right now.
All right, folks, that's it for today. Thanks. We will see you next week. Have good holidays coming up.
I've treated trauma in war zones, car accidents, backcountry rescues, you name it. And I often had to rely on inferior equipment. So when the folks at Jason Medical offered to help me build the medical kits I'd always dreamed of, I jumped at the chance. Let's start with the Jace Medic Kit. It's laid out for fast, intuitive access. It even includes a dedicated slot for the Jace case, your emergency supply of antibiotics. Next is the Jace Trauma Kit. This is for the most serious injuries, massive bleeding, chest wounds, burns, blunt trauma. We've also included a powerful lineup of over-the-counter and prescription medications. For everyday injuries, this is the Jace Aid Kit, your glove box, backpack, kitchen drawer essential. Compact, rugged, and packed with high-quality supplies. It's the first rugged kit combining prescription meds and premium first aid gear.
Visit patriot.tv/kit, that's patriot.tv/kit, to get the only med kit on the market designed for real-world emergencies.